This
watching my
week on
mom
the
and
Life
other
Well
women
podcast.
cry and sing hymns and rock and hum and call out to Jesus. And I thought they were doing too much. Like I said, I would be thinking, looking up at my mom. Now, you said my friends could come over. Are you going to be in a good mood when we leave here? And I would sit there with my arms crossed like, this is a lot. But now, at the ripe age of 28, I have found myself becoming my mother. I haven't gotten the church mother rock down just yet, but I've definitely gotten out of the I don't want to cry and mess up my makeup. I'm out of that phase. Take the lashes off. Welcome back to the Life Well podcast. As always, I am your host, Catherine Young, and I want to know something. I want to know how you've been feeling since our last episode. Maybe you skipped it. Maybe you opted out from watching it. Maybe you've been watching your favorite, television programs instead. I've been watching Watson. I tried to watch it several times. Like I started season 1, episode 1 over like 10 times, and then that 10th time I locked in. Maybe you've been doing that instead of trying to invest in your wellness, and maybe you're back, right? So I want to ask you something because it's important to me, like how you've been doing, how you've been feeling before we dive into today's episode. Because, it's not always about sadness here at the Life Well podcast. When's the last time you laughed? And I mean like slapping, running into your friend, out into the crowd laughing, bent over in tears, even, laughing, which then begs the next question. When was the last time you cried? I mean, like clutching your pearl, snotty nose, almost hyperventilating in tears, kind of crying. Because I want to talk about tears today. I know I said it's not always sad here at the Life Well podcast, but I do want to talk about tears today, the kind that you try to just kind of blink away, or the kind you have trained yourself to hold in, the kind you only cry when no one's around, or it kind of forces itself out when things just become to be too much. Today, we're going to explore the legacy of the weeping woman, the wailing woman in scripture. Church mothers who groan when they pray, and aunties who rock side to side when the spirit comes in the room. Altar workers who hold you tight when you cry and they don't ask you for all of the details. Those are the kinds of tears that I want to talk about today. Fergie, she taught us that big girls don't cry. I officially would like to beg to differ, okay, Miss Fergalicious. I'm a big girl, and my frontal lobe is fully developed, okay? And I'm crying more in this stage of my life than I ever have. Everything is all hormonal and epigenetic, I feel like. And don't get it twisted, okay? The girl isn't sad every single day of her life. I cry at dance recitals, okay? My niece has done things on that floor that I honestly don't think I could ever try again without breaking something, and it brings me to tears. And then sometimes I'm just casually scrolling on TikTok, seeing mothers that I'll never meet reunite with sons who've been off to war for the first time, and now I'm crying. And sometimes your girl is just talking to God about what he has pulled off in her life. Prayers that I know for a fact no one else knows about. And the theme of the conversation is found sometimes in a weekend stroll through Home Goods. And now here I am crying again. So, Fergie, I'm not calling you a liar, but I'm not calling you a truther either. I'm so shocked by this emotional transition because I spent the large majority of my life not having full access to my emotions, and then working really hard to make sure that nobody else ever had access to them either. And I think a lot of people, men and women alike, and especially believers, we're never taught to process emotions. We were taught how to manage emotions and suppress emotions and move past emotions. But emotionally, what we don't process, we end up carrying. And when it gets too heavy, we crash out. So, for the science in today's episode, it's important that we lock in to this one truth. We need three key concepts to guide us here because we're going to be doing a lot of conversation. So if you haven't been taking notes or you're not keeping up with the episodes, this is going to be one that you maybe don't want to listen to while you're driving, okay? We want to sit down and digest this. Key concept number one, emotions are biological, okay? They are spiritual, but they are also biological, okay? Key concept number two, suppression is not processing. And key concept number three, the nervous system actually needs it to be finished. Easter was yesterday. When you're watching this, Easter won't be yesterday. But the day I'm recording it, Easter was yesterday. It's finished. The nervous system also relates to that concept. So a lot of us were never actually taught how to process emotions. We were taught how to regulate behavior and stay composed and know how to function, but not how to actually get the internal experience out so that we can move forward in a kind of weightless way. And there is a difference because from a psychological standpoint, what we don't process doesn't disappear, okay? It just gets stored somewhere else and then re-expressed, usually against our will. And in my experience, re-expression is usually misaligned with the actual concern that triggers the memory. And it's usually inappropriate for the setting that I am in when my mind decides it's time to process. Like, I don't want to process grief and lack and loss in the middle of Publix. Okay, I've got groceries to get and I need to go home. But when we suppress and suppress and suppress, pop goes the weasel. And that's because we just talk about emotions, but we're not actually talking about our thoughts. Emotion is a full psychological and physiological experience. It involves your limbic system. We're in school now. The limbic system is a group of brain structures that are responsible for processing emotion, memory, and threat detection. It is your security system. You have one, I have one, everyone that you know has one. It includes areas like the amygdala, which scans for danger and triggers emotional responses. It includes your hippocampus, which is responsible for forming and storing memory. So it's your filing cabinet system and the files that are inside of it. The hypothalamus is also included in this limbic system, which connects your emotional experience to your body's physical response. So when we talk about feeling anxious or overwhelmed or feeling safe and connected, that's largely the limbic system on her full-time job, okay? It's constantly evaluating your environment. Is this safe? Is this familiar? Does this matter to me? And then signaling your body on how to respond. Now, I want to note, the limbic system operates very quickly, okay? And often outside of your conscious awareness. It reacts before your thinking brain up here, this prefrontal cortex, has time to interpret what's really happening. And that's why you can kind of feel something in your body before you can logically explain it. And feeling happens in everyone's limbic system, but everyone's limbic system is a little bit different. It is the science behind why roller coasters are thrilling to the students that I used to teach and the bane of my personal experience and existence. I don't want to get on a roller coaster if you gave me $10 million. Now, if you're watching this and you have 10 million in the M's or billion, I'll take that as well. Then maybe I'll give it a try. But for anything less, I'm not getting on a roller coaster, okay? Because within the limbic system, and particularly the amygdala, which is responsible for detecting threats and assigning emotional salience and importance to experiences, when I think about roller coasters, I don't think about comfort, thrill, or excitement. Some other people do. The activation that happens to me signals my autonomic nervous system, especially something called the sympathetic branch, to prepare my body to respond to what I'm calling dangerous. So before you ever consciously think, I feel anxious or I feel sad, your body has already responded. You might feel tightness in your chest or like a drop in your stomach or tension in your shoulders. Are your shoulders tense right now while you're watching this episode? Bring them down for your ears. Is your jaw clenched? Okay, let's go ahead and relax that. Are your eyebrows a little furrowed? Go ahead and relax your face. This is interoceptive work, that internal awareness of what's happening in your body. So when I say your body feels before your mind explains, I actually mean that literally. This physiological response precedes the cognitive label attached to your experience. Now, Where many of us may run into difficulty is how we respond to that activation. That also is pretty diverse across person to person. So instead of processing the emotion, sometimes we suppress it. And suppression, like I said, is not the same thing as regulation. Suppression is an avoidance based strategy, okay, where we attempt to inhibit the expression or the experience of an emotion. And research shows that chronic emotional suppression is actually associated with physiological arousal. That's a big word for Elmo. What do I mean? Higher cortisol levels. Still a big word for Elmo. Stress. Okay, we're chronically stressed, and that's impacting our body, not just our thoughts, but our muscles and our circulatory system and our blood vessels and our heart, right? Our sympathetic activation is being increased. And long term, this is impacting our mental and our physical health, which means this is important to talk about. So when people say, I'm fine, or I'll just push through, what's often happening is not resilience. It's emotional inhibition. And the problem with inhibition is that the emotional material actually doesn't resolve itself. It remains unprocessed in the nervous system. Think about your nervous system as a refrigerator, okay? And you put your vegetables in there and you decide, you know what, that diet that I wanted to start when I went grocery shopping, I'm done with that. And you just let the vegetables sit in the back of the refrigerator. What's gonna happen? They're going to spoil. And if you act like it's not there, eventually your whole refrigerator is going to be spoiled by the fruit or the vegetables that you left in there. And if you leave it in there too long, you won't have to even open the fridge to know that something's rotting on the inside. People are going to know it the minute they walk through the door. This is what happens with emotional suppression. So from a trauma-informed perspective, we understand that the nervous system is, like I said in the beginning, it's designed for completion. It wants to finish the story. It wants to know what happened so that it can know when to move on. And when an emotion or a stress response is activated, the body expects a resolution, some form of discharge, like let's, launch and be done. And that's where things like crying and deep breathing or even verbal expression to a friend, a loved one, or even a licensed clinician, that can come in. And these are not signs of weakness. These are regulatory mechanisms. This is how you take these spoiled, rotten fruit out of the back of the fridge and throw it away and stop thinking that that box of Arm& Hammer sitting in the back of your fridge is actually doing anything. You're letting the mold spread and you're covering up because you've got that orange box sitting in the back of your fridge. What's your orange box? Okay? What's your orange box? Because if we're not taking the spoiled thing out, you're allowing your nervous system to return to baseline with the icky thing still inside. So I want to talk to Miss Fergalicious again. Fergie, if you're listening to this, crying is not just emotional. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest and restoration. And that's why people often feel a sense of relief after they cry. The system has removed some of that stress that was stored during the state of activation. But when we don't allow that release in the form of crying or another output activity, that activation remains. And that's when we start to see symptoms like chronic stress and irritability and rumination, meaning like thinking on the same thing over and over and over again, getting stuck in that kind of loop, and even somatic tension in your shoulders or in your jaw, or you constantly find yourself like digging your nails into your fist. Unprocessed emotion doesn't go away. It just gets recoded and encoded and expressed in other ways. And what's interesting is that this aligns very closely to what we see in Scripture. The Bible does not promote emotional suppression. It actually models emotional expression. Jesus wept, okay? If you want to memorize the Scripture in this year, 2026, you just did it. John 11:35, Jesus wept. And not because he lacked control or awareness or he wasn't a real man. He was fully aware of what was about to happen, but he still engaged emotionally with the moment. That suggests that emotional expression is not incompatible with strength. I want to say that again. Emotional expression, whether that is crying, laughing, having a nice side comment with a friend. I'm not just talking about emotional expression that is sad, expressing your joy, expressing your fun, expressing your creativity. that is not incompatible with your faith, nor is it incompatible with your strength. It is integrated into it. And that's important to note. We also see David kind of model emotional honesty. Okay? Statements like, "How long, Lord? Why have you forsaken me?" This reflects a direct expression of distress. From a clinical perspective, that is called labeling and emotional processing. It's naming the experience and directing toward a relational context. And that's what lament is. Now, as a therapist, I have to say, should we have a full lifestyle of lamenting and lamenting only? No. But is lamenting in its entirety dysregulation? No. It's structured emotional expression and the presence of God. It maintains a connection while allowing for a full emotional experience. So when we talk about weeping well, we're not talking about staying stuck, okay? I'm not talking about crying all day, not going to work, not brushing your teeth. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about allowing the emotional response to move through its natural cycle. Activation, it happened. Awareness, I know it happened. Expression, I let it out. And resolution, I'm moving forward. Because healing is not just cognitive. It's not just about changing your thoughts. It's about integrating your emotional and physiological experiences as well. So practically, that means first increasing your emotional awareness, okay? Emotional intelligence is a buzzword on TikTok. Knowing how you feel. This is something that therapy can actually help with. Okay, shameless plug. Yes, I am a therapist. I think you should go to therapy. Therapy can teach you how to put language to what you are experiencing. Secondly, allowing the emotion without immediate avoidance or suppression. And then third, engage then with some kind of expression. Give yourself some time. It happened. Then I recognize how I'm feeling. Then I act. Putting some time in between those things kind of keeps you from doing things that you may regret as a result of how you are feeling in the moment. That could look like crying, journaling, verbal processing, going for a run, calling your homegirl, cleaning out your closet, throwing away everything that reminds you of that person, whatever it is. But we want to ensure that there's some time in between the activation and then the expression. And fourth, you got to maintain your connection with God, with yourself, and with others so that the emotion that's processed in the relationship doesn't leave you in isolation. Because ultimately, avoidance, that's going to lead to disconnection, okay? And expression leads to integration. And like I said earlier, what you don't process, what you don't get out, what you don't let out, you end up carrying. Because what we allow to move through us, we can actually begin to heal from. So let's look to scripture. Ecclesiastes 3:4 says, "There's a time to weep and a time to laugh. And if you're like me, you love to laugh. And if you are grateful that there is a time to laugh, and you don't acknowledge that there is a time to weep, you are only embracing half of the word." Emotion is seasonal and appropriate. It is not sinful. Sometimes you're going to have to cry, and sometimes you're going to have to laugh. And in my research, I have seen this expressed the most in women, particularly church mothers, okay? If you grew up in Black church, you already know the sound. There's weeping from the back pew. There's a grandmother potentially whispering, "Yes, Lord," with her eyes closed, the rocking, the swaying, the moaning for words. Sometimes you don't even know what they're saying. Maybe they're speaking in tongues. They are expanding the emotional range of the church, any kind of service that you have been to. And I can remember being a kid watching my mom like cry and pray and even shout. And I would get scared because I'm like, "What's going on with the girl? We're going to be all right because you said my friends could come over after church." But I didn't realize that her role was more than just crying out for herself and crying out for her family, but she was serving as a symbol in that environment to expand the emotional range of the other members of the congregation. And many of us grew up in families or communities where emotions were not safe. You can't cry without being shamed. Okay, big girls don't cry. Miss Fergalicious herself. You couldn't be soft without being called weak. So sometimes you don't know that it is okay to let it out until you step into a sanctuary and you see a grown woman crying openly, laying out on the floor, wailing before the Lord. And not as a breakdown, but as a form of worship and spiritual strength. And that expanded your nervous system's capacity to feel deeply without shame. I know it expanded mine. And science shows us that chronic stress can be passed down through generations. But if that is true, so can resilience. And this is called epigenetics. While trauma can literally change the way that genes are expressed throughout children and grandchildren going forward or backward in the generation, protective factors like safe relationships, prayer, faith, co-regulation can buffer those effects. So when your grandmother prayed over your mother, she also prayed over you. This is spiritual. This is engaging in the kinds of things that break down generational trauma. You see, my grandmother, Mary Catherine Woods, and Annie Mae Jones, they weren't just keeping their families together. They were rewiring a legacy of safety and of strength. And these women made emotions safe again. They taught all of us that tears aren't a threat to our faith. They are a testimony to it, right? When we cry, particularly the kinds of tears that are emotionally driven, not just from like cutting onions, our bodies go through something called parasympathetic activation. And this is a part of your autonomic nervous system that we talked about earlier. It's what kicks in after fight, flight, or freeze. It's the system responsible for rest and digestion and repair. So when you weep, your heart rate eventually starts to slow down, okay? Your breath deepens and your body begins to release that built up cortisol. You literally begin to come back into regulation. And that regulation isn't just physical, it is emotional, and it can even be spiritual. Now pair that with co-regulation, which is when your nervous system kind of syncs up with another person's calm presence. This happens in therapy all of the time. That's why we say, that's where the phrase, is this a safe space? That's where that comes from. It's rooted in co-regulation. And this is why crying with someone, like even a church mother who's holding your hand while you cry at the altar, makes you feel different than just crying alone. And like I said, I grew up in Black church, watching my mom and other women cry and sing hymns and rock and hum and call out to Jesus. And I thought they were doing too much. Like I said, I would be thinking, looking up at my mom, now you said my friends could come over. Are you going to be in a good mood when we leave here? And I would sit there with my arms crossed, like this is a lot. But now, at the ripe age of 28, I have found myself becoming my mother. I haven't gotten the church mother rock down just yet, but I've definitely gotten out of the I don't want to cry and mess up my makeup. I'm out of that phase. Take the lashes off, okay? Because what I've seen, what happens when women weep well, no shade to the fellas, okay, but we're getting ready for She's Well. When women weep well, when people feel safe enough to cry and still be held in high regard and in close company after, that doesn't just change your body, it changes the bodies of everyone around you. And that doesn't just happen in church. It can happen everywhere. It happens in therapy rooms when a client finally cries. And me as a therapist or anyone else, we don't rush to fix it. It happens in hospital waiting rooms when a hand is held through grief or excitement. The words, the surgery went well, fall like bricks. The words, I'm sorry, fall like bricks. It can happen in a hospital room too. It happens at kitchen tables. When your friend lets you sob over a miscarriage, over a loss, over a rejection, or the quiet disappointment that no one else truly notices. It happens in nursing homes and in hair salons and on porches and even in text messages. If somebody simply replies and says, I'm here for you. Because our nervous system was designed to be regulated in relationship, which we talked about last season, shameless plug for Right Relationship series, season number 2, go back and watch it. We have a new vocabulary word, okay? Mirror neurons, okay? Say it with me. Say mirror. I can't actually hear you. I'm thinking you're saying it. Mirror neurons. Thank you so much. In the brain, these mirror neurons allow us to feel seen and mirrored emotionally. And when we see someone else express their pain or laugh or even run, the same regions in our own brain lights up. And that is why communal weeping adds value to a space. What we used to see in old church traditions is actually very healing because we are not meant to mourn in silence. We are meant to mourn in community. So we have another word. Repeat after me. Vagus nerve. Say Vegas. Vegas. Not Las Vegas. Vegas. Nerve. Good job. This is the largest cranial nerve in your body. I'm giving you a lot of science today. It runs through your brainstem, through your throat, through your heart, through your lungs, and through your gut. The vagus nerve is activated through movement in that area, which is usually how we make sounds. So crying, singing, humming, and even a deep sigh. All of those things can stimulate the body's natural calming system. God designed us this way. So when mothers wail, when women weep, when the church cried out in words that are too deep to interpret, that's science. That's regulation. And that is healing. And per usual, scripture told us this long before psychology had a bunch of fancy language to add to it. Jeremiah 9:17 and 18 says, "Call for the mourning women to come, and send for the most skillful of them. Let them come quickly and wail over us, till our eyes overflow with tears, and water streams down from our eyelids." God himself instructed his people to call for the girls who know how to cry, the skilled mourners, the trained grievers. Call for the crybabies is what the Bible is saying. But we're so quick to shout and dance and clap, and that's beautiful. But when was the last time we were taught how to weep? When was the last time? We also see a woman in Luke chapter 7 who weeps at Jesus' feet. She pours out her perfume and her tears on him. And he calls that worship. He doesn't rebuke her. He receives her. And in Romans 8:26, it says, "The Spirit helps us in our weakness, with groans too deep for words." God understands even your wordless weeping, okay? Because sometimes grief is too deep to articulate, okay? We've talked about so far in this season. And yet the Lord still hears us. So here's the truth. On a psychological level, crying is connection, okay? Weep well. Crying is co-regulation. So you can weep well. Crying is also concentration. And the church mothers knew that. They didn't need fancy words. They didn't need 3 points in a poem. They groaned. They wept. They cried out for our healing when we were too shut down to cry for ourselves. We need to bring that back. We need safe spaces to fall apart without shame. And again, I want to reiterate, I don't know why I think you're thinking this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I'm not saying I want you to sit in your house and cry all day, right? I'm not saying every time you and your homegirl go to dinner, y'all need to cry at the end of it. But I am saying that if you've been holding things in for the past 3 months and you know that if one song comes on, you're going to buckle down in the middle of work, then we probably should learn how to process that emotion in a healthy way regularly so that you can show up fully for the other emotions that you want to express. We need this safe space. We need women and we need men too who know how to weep well. How much deeper can we dig? I don't know. Let's see. I want to tell you a story. A while ago, I was sitting at church, okay, standing in worship like I always do, and I was trying to keep it together, okay? You know the feeling when the lump is already in your throat, you can feel it coming, but you're trying really hard to stay composed. I had just told someone that I really liked, but I knew it wasn't the right one for me, that we couldn't be together. And it was clear, and it was right, but I was sad, and I felt guilty, and I was a little bit lonely in full transparency. It was a kind of confusion that makes you question like a little bit of everything, not just the potential of a relationship, but your own discernment, your faith, your future, some of the prayers that I had prayed. I had prayed for love to find me again, and a version of it did, right? But it wasn't the right fit. And I remember standing there, arms raised, tears starting to burn behind my eyes and my lash glue. And as I stood there with my eyes burning, A woman that I've actually known since I was a toddler gently walked over to me and she placed her hand just gently on my back, right? She didn't say a word to me directly, but I could hear that she was praying, and I assumed that she was praying on my behalf. And the music was playing, and everyone was in a moment of prayer around me. But in that moment, I feel like God stopped. He left the room on autopilot and came just to talk to me because she took the time to flag him down when I couldn't do it for myself. And in true Baptist fashion, whatever you want to call it, I was on the floor eating carpet, as the people say. I sobbed so hard. I felt like I couldn't breathe. And she just stayed there, hand on my back, humming softly, no rush, no judgment. And it was the first time in a long time I felt like I didn't have to hold it all together. Like I could be sad, I could grieve, I could feel guilty, I could feel lonely. And as we discussed in episode 1, grieving is normal. I still think about that moment because what that woman did wasn't flashy, okay? She didn't throw a bunch of oil on my head and throw the prayer cloth and do all of these things. It wasn't performed. I'm sure nobody even saw me. She was just present. And sometimes that is simply what it means to weep well, to hold space for sadness, for loneliness, for grief, your own and other people's too. To cry and express yourself without shame, to breathe without restraint, to laugh without fear of the future, to let the tears, the push, the prayer, and the laugh do the work of unclenching things that we have just been white-knuckling through. We've been fighting when we don't really have to fight that hard. I want you all to say this. No one is really going to say it here in the studio as I'm recording, but where you are, I want you to say this. I'm allowed to feel. I'm allowed to. You have my permission. Anybody who says that you can't, you tell them I said you have permission to feel. You're allowed to grieve. Say, I am allowed to laugh. I am allowed to raise my voice if I need to. And when I say raise my voice, am I saying like yelling at the people in the parking lot because somebody took the park that you wanted? No. I'm talking about raising the volume of your voice as you're expressing yourself. Because your tears are not a weakness. They are a witness. Because when we weep well, we heal out loud. And we make room for other people to simply be human too. You're just a girl. I know sometimes people say that's like an excuse to get away with not doing things. And if you're a man and you're watching this, you're just a boy. Well, I hope that you grow up to become a man. We're just a girl, but we have to grow up and become women. So whether you're in a season of joy or sorrow or transition or numbness, I pray that you find space to cry. And that not equate to you being weak or broken, because crying isn't breaking. Sometimes it is the first sign that you are finally whole. If you're anything like me, sometimes after a good cry, you just feel tired, but you also feel kind of honest, and that's a good place to be. Psalms 56:8 says, and he tells us, it reminds us that God collects our tears in a bottle. If that's the case, I know for sure there is a freezer or refrigerator section somewhere in heaven just with my name on it, full of the tears that I have cried. But that means that your sadness, your tears, they've never been wasted. Nope, not one drop. So here's your invitation this week. Here's a big one. Let someone see your tears. What does that look like? I don't want you to plan it per se, right? We're not crying on cue, but if there's something you need to process and the emotions just kind of start flowing, let them. Is that fair of a request? Another thought for homework, because we do homework here at the Life Well podcast, let God hold the things you've been carrying, right? What that can always look like, having a conversation in prayer, writing it down in your journal, typing it in your phone, whatever your regulatory practice of communion and conversation with the Lord, tell him the stuff that you feel like you would want to cry about, but it's just not coming naturally. And my last invitation for you this week for a little bit of homework is to just let your heart rest. Practically, that could look like 1,000 different things. You want a safe space maybe to attend a prayer night or like a worship gathering, and don't hold back. You could cry in the presence of someone who can hold that cry without needing the full story. Or you can sit in silence. You could stand in your shower and just cry if you need to cry. And if you're in a place to give that gift to someone else, be that person, be that woman, be that man who can check in on someone and have the emotional capacity to hear their full truth. Be that church mother if you're so inclined. I invite you. Like I said, I'm not there yet at this ripe old age. But one of these days, who's going to be the aunties, right? Who are going to be the church mothers? If we don't learn how to weep well, who's going to intercede like my grandmother and my mother did for me? Be that friend who hums. Now, if you've got a song in your spirit, I'd love to hear it. Okay? I don't have one. But if you do, I want to hear it. Be that friend who rocks, who waits, who doesn't interrupt the tears and you just let your friend process what they need to process. Let's become women who weep well, not just for ourselves, but for our daughters, for our communities, and for our future. This is information that I truly believe we need to hear because it came to my mind last summer in a time in my life where crying just became my norm. Like, wake up, sun is out, I'm gonna cry today, right? And I just wanna make sure that people who may not have access to the kind of psychological knowledge that I do have the information that crying is not brokenness. Like I said, it is usually the first sign that you are either becoming whole or you have reached a level of wholeness where you are letting your emotions be processed. You are looking at that refrigerator of emotions and you're not letting stuff just rot in the background because a lie has taught you that nobody cares, or a lie has taught you that no one wants to hear what you have to say, or the lie that you should be over it by now, or that you were just laughing yesterday so you can't be crying today. We want to get rid of all of that stuff that's running in the background. Clean out your refrigerator. Also, shameless plug, you should probably clean out your real refrigerator. And as you do that, talk to the Lord about the things that you maybe need to weep about, or how to be the kind of person that becomes a safe space for someone else to weep. And
thank you for watching.
Until next time, as always, if you're crying, I don't think I went too far in the Digging Deeper segment this time, but if I did, I hope that this episode initially found you well. And if you're feeling sad afterwards, I hope that you become well after you weep a little bit, and prayerfully we all stay well. I'm Catherine, and this is the Life Well Podcast.
I'm so glad they prayed for me. My mother prayed for me. She had me on her mind. She took the time and prayed for me. I'm so glad she prayed. I'm so glad she prayed. I'm so glad she prayed for me.